What you are about to hear represents one of the most significant escalations in modern geopolitical history. Today, Vladimir Putin crossed a line that Western intelligence agencies have been warning about for months. He delivered an ultimatum so bold, so unprecedented, and so dangerous that it sent shockwaves through every major capital from Washington to Brussels. And what happened next caught even the most seasoned diplomatic observers completely off guard. The United States did not wait for lengthy consultations. They did not engage in prolonged deliberations or diplomatic back and forth. Within just 6 hours of Putin's announcement, the Pentagon authorized a staggering $2.3 billion in emergency military assistance to Ukraine. This was not your typical aid package. This was a message, and that message was crystal clear. Let me take you through exactly what happened today and why this moment could reshape the trajectory of this entire conflict. For weeks now, intelligence analysts across the Western Alliance have been tracking unusual patterns emerging from Russia. These were not the normal movements you expect during an ongoing military campaign. Something felt different. The rhythm that had characterized Russian operations for nearly 2 years suddenly disappeared. Putin, who typically operates with a certain degree of predictability despite his hostility, went quiet in ways that made officials in Washington and across Europe extremely nervous. When Putin goes silent, it usually means something major is brewing behind the scenes. American intelligence agencies began detecting what they describe as unprecedented nuclear signaling operations earlier this morning. Mobile launch platforms that had remained stationary for over 18 months suddenly began repositioning. These are not ordinary military assets. These are platforms specifically designed to carry tactical nuclear warheads. Russia only moves these systems when it wants to send a very specific message to the international community. Whether that message represents escalation, coercion, or actual preparation for potential use remains unclear. What is abundantly clear is that Moscow fundamentally shifted its strategic posture in a way that demanded immediate attention from the highest levels of American leadership. But that was just the beginning. Alongside these military movements, intelligence agencies detected encrypted communications surging between strategic command facilities across Russia. Early warning radar networks that typically operate in standby mode suddenly came online in full operational capacity. Diplomatic personnel from Russian embassies in key Western capitals received unexpected orders to return home. Each of these signals individually might not mean much. Together, they painted a picture that nobody in Washington wanted to see. Russia was preparing something significant, and the uncertainty surrounding that preparation created genuine alarm among national security officials. Then came Putin's statement. Hours after these intelligence reports reached the desks of senior American officials, Putin delivered what can only be described as an ultimatum. He demanded that Ukraine immediately withdraw from territories that Russia claims to have annexed. He demanded that NATO cease all weapons deliveries to Kiev. And he issued a warning that any violation of these demands would be met with, in his words, all the means at Russia's disposal. Now, diplomatic language can sometimes be ambiguous, but this phrase carries a very specific meaning in the context of nuclear-armed states. Everyone understood exactly what Putin was threatening. The international community has dealt with Russian provocations before. Throughout this conflict, Moscow has repeatedly invoked the specter of nuclear weapons to deter Western support for Ukraine. But today felt fundamentally different. This was not vague posturing or rhetorical saber-rattling. This was a direct ultimatum backed by observable military preparations. Putin essentially told Ukraine and its Western allies that they must surrender to his demands or face consequences that could include nuclear options. This represents an extraordinarily dangerous escalation in the conduct of international relations. Washington's response came faster than anyone anticipated. Within 6 hours of Putin's broadcast, the Pentagon announced an emergency security assistance package totaling $2.3 billion. Officials emphasized that this was not a routine resupply operation. This package contained advanced weapons systems that the United States typically reserves for situations requiring fundamental battlefield transformation. The message from the American military establishment was unmistakable. Nuclear blackmail will not achieve its intended objectives.
Let me break down exactly what this aid package contains because the specifics matter enormously. The United States is accelerating the deployment of long-range ATACMS missiles to Ukrainian forces. These are precision strike weapons capable of reaching targets deep behind Russian lines. Additionally, the package includes additional Patriot air defense batteries, which represent the most advanced anti-missile systems in the American arsenal. Perhaps most significantly, the Pentagon authorized components necessary for expanded F-16 fighter jet operations, including ammunition types that analysts believe were previously restricted specifically to avoid escalation. Washington essentially unlocked capabilities that they had been holding in reserve precisely for moments like this. The strategic logic behind this response deserves careful examination. Putin's ultimatum was not merely symbolic. It was designed to be executable. The military preparations observed by intelligence agencies suggest that Moscow was positioning itself to potentially follow through on its threats if the West showed any sign of wavering. By responding immediately with advanced weapons systems, the United States targeted Russia's capacity to execute those threats. They reinforced Ukraine's ability to strike logistical centers supplying Russian forces. They enhanced Ukraine's capacity to target command facilities, presumably coordinating the ultimatum's military foundation. In essence, America attacked the credibility of Putin's threat by strengthening Ukraine's ability to fight back. Intelligence officials currently believe that Putin engineered this ultimatum to test the solidarity of Western support. After months of political uncertainty in Washington, Moscow wanted to see whether the United States would fracture under pressure. Would American political divisions paralyze decision-making? Would Europeans prioritize their own economic interests over Ukrainian sovereignty? Would the Western alliance finally show the cracks that Putin has been expecting since February 2022? Today provided his answer, and it was not the answer he wanted. The speed and comprehensiveness of America's response stunned even the Kremlin, according to sources familiar with Russian internal communications. Washington did not wait for European consensus. They did not condition their response on Russian de-escalation. They did not offer Putin any kind of face-saving compromise at Ukraine's expense. They simply reinforced Ukraine's military capabilities and made clear that ultimatums based on nuclear threats will produce the opposite of their intended effect. Defense analysts describe Putin's approach as coercive diplomacy, a mechanism for extracting concessions through intimidation rather than negotiation. Today demonstrated that this mechanism has failed. What makes this moment particularly dangerous is the context surrounding Putin's decision. The Russian president faces mounting domestic pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Military hardliners are demanding faster territorial gains after nearly 2 years of grinding warfare. Economic advisors are pushing for sanctions relief as the Russian economy strains under Western restrictions. Security services are concerned about internal stability as casualties mount and public patience wears thin. Nationalist voices are demanding visible victories that Putin has been unable to deliver. He is trying to balance all these competing demands while managing a conflict that has cost Russia an estimated 350,000 casualties, according to Western intelligence assessments. Leaders operating under this kind of pressure do not always make rational calculations. When Putin issues sudden ultimatums backed by nuclear threats, he may be acting not from a position of strength, but from a position of desperation. This makes the situation even more unpredictable and potentially dangerous. A cornered leader with nuclear weapons and mounting domestic problems represents one of the most volatile combinations in international politics. The State Department released a statement characterizing Russia's ultimatum as incompatible with responsible nuclear state behavior. In diplomatic terminology, this represents an exceptionally strong condemnation. Officials made clear that nuclear threats cannot become normalized instruments of statecraft. The international order that has prevented great power conflict for decades rests on the assumption that nuclear weapons exist for deterrence, not coercion. Putin's ultimatum directly challenges that assumption, and the West cannot allow this challenge to succeed.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed his nation this evening with a speech that balanced defiance with determination. He stated unequivocally that Ukraine will not negotiate under the shadow of nuclear blackmail. He emphasized that every ultimatum from Moscow only strengthens Ukrainian resolve rather than weakening it. and he reminded the world that history will ultimately judge who fought for freedom and who surrendered to fear. These were not empty rhetorical flourishes. These were the words of a leader who understands that his nation's survival depends on refusing to capitulate to threats. The situation becomes even more concerning when you consider that Putin's ultimatum did not occur in isolation. Within the same 72-hour window, Belarus announced joint military exercises on Ukraine's northern border. Iran confirmed deliveries of additional Shahed drone components to Russian forces. North Korea reportedly accelerated shipments of artillery ammunition to Russian ports. When Moscow coordinates movements across multiple partners simultaneously, it typically signals preparation for something larger. Analysts are currently evaluating several possibilities, including a major spring offensive, an attempt to freeze the conflict on current territorial lines, or, most concerningly, an effort to establish nuclear threats as legitimate negotiating instruments. NATO officials have been monitoring Russian nuclear forces continuously throughout today. They report no indication of imminent nuclear use. Putin's rhetoric appears to exceed his actual operational preparations according to alliance assessments. However, this provides limited comfort. The danger lies not in immediate nuclear employment, but in the normalization of nuclear threats as diplomatic leverage. If Putin succeeds in extracting concessions through nuclear blackmail, every authoritarian leader with atomic weapons will take notice. The precedent would be catastrophic for international security. What happens over the next 72 to 96 hours will prove absolutely critical. Putin has tied his credibility to this ultimatum. If Ukraine does not surrender and the West does not crumble, he faces difficult choices. He could escalate further, which would be extraordinarily dangerous given NATO's stated position that any use of weapons of mass destruction would fundamentally alter the nature of the conflict. He could continue current operations while softening his rhetoric, which would represent an implicit admission of failure that domestic hardliners would not tolerate. Or he could search for some face-saving mechanism that allows retreat without appearing defeated, though such a mechanism would require willing partners. Tonight, all indicators suggest determination across the Western alliance. NATO remains united, Ukraine remains defiant. The United States has demonstrated willingness to back its commitments with concrete military action, but this resolve must be sustained. The coming days will test whether democracies can maintain unity under prolonged pressure from a nuclear-armed adversary willing to threaten catastrophic consequences. What we witness today transcends the immediate military implications. This represents a fundamental test of whether coercion can succeed against a united democratic alliance. Putin believed Western unity would shatter under pressure. He believed European energy dependence would fracture NATO solidarity. He believed American political divisions would paralyze decision-making. Tonight proved those beliefs catastrophically wrong. The architecture of international security built since 1945 held firm against one of its greatest tests. This conflict is far from over. The dangers remain acute. But something became abundantly clear today. Ukraine continues fighting, America remains committed, and Putin's ultimatum has already failed to achieve its primary objective of dividing the Western alliance. Nuclear threats did not weaken democratic resolve. They strengthened it. Ultimatums did not produce concessions. They produced the largest emergency military aid package in over a year, and underestimating the West remains Vladimir Putin's greatest strategic miscalculation.